July 29th, 2023, 7:30 in the evening, in a quiet residential area of Victoria, Australia. 52-year-old Sarah Wilson was making her final preparations, gazing at the dinner table she had so carefully set. A special dish of beef and mushrooms was elegantly arranged on plates of different colors. "Tonight the family will finally come together," she whispered to herself. But there was something unsettling in her eyes. Something that didn't quite match the warm smile on her face. Just 3 hours later, 4 family members would be rushed to the hospital in excruciating pain. Within a week, 3 of them would be dead. What happened at Sarah Wilson's dinner table that night? And why did she serve different colored plates to each family member? This story will take you into the darkest corners of family betrayal, where a seemingly innocent family dinner became a calculated act of murder. What would you have done if you were one of the guests that night? Share your thoughts in the comments. That evening, 4 beloved family members received what they thought was a genuine invitation to reconnect over a home-cooked meal. Robert and Margaret Coleman were Sarah's former in-laws, both in their 70s. Robert had spent 40 years as a dedicated mechanic, known throughout the community for his honest work and generous spirit. Margaret was a retired school teacher who had touched hundreds of children's lives. Even after Sarah's divorce from their son, they maintained a cordial relationship, always putting family first. Dad always said family comes before everything else, their surviving son would later tell investigators. He believed in second chances, in keeping families together no matter what. Eleanor Matthews was Robert's sister, a vibrant 69-year-old who had recently retired from nursing. She had dedicated her life to caring for others, working night shifts for decades to help her patients through their darkest hours. Eleanor was known for her infectious laugh and her famous Sunday roasts that brought the family together every month. Ian Matthews was Eleanor's husband of 45 years, a gentle 70-year-old retired teacher who had taught mathematics to 3 generations in the same small town. Ian was a quiet man who found joy in his garden and in reading bedtime stories to his grandchildren via video calls. These were not just names in a police report. These were pillars of their community, grandparents who were looking forward to watching their grandchildren grow up, and loving family members who believed in the power of forgiveness and family unity. On July 29th, 2023, they were simply excited about a family dinner. None of them could have imagined it would be their last meal together. Sarah Wilson was a 52-year-old woman living alone in Victoria, Australia. To her neighbors, she appeared to be a quiet, ordinary middle-aged woman dealing with the challenges of divorce and single life. But beneath this unremarkable exterior lay a complex web of financial troubles, resentment, and what investigators would later discover to be a troubling pattern of deception. Sarah had been married to David Coleman, Robert and Margaret's son, for several years before their relationship deteriorated. The divorce had been messy, involving disputes over property and ongoing tensions with David's family. Financial records would later reveal that Sarah was facing significant monetary pressures. She had been struggling to maintain her lifestyle and had mounting debts that she couldn't resolve through conventional means. But perhaps more telling was what investigators found in her internet search history, a trail of research that painted a very different picture of this seemingly innocent woman. What the family didn't know was that for over a year before that fateful dinner, Sarah had been researching something very specific. Something that would turn a family gathering into a nightmare. Sarah Wilson is currently serving a life sentence with a minimum of 33 years before parole eligibility, following her conviction for murder. In the weeks leading up to July 29th, Sarah Wilson reached out to her former in-laws with what seemed like an olive branch. Despite the tensions from the divorce, she invited them for a reconciliation dinner at her home. "I want to put the past behind us," she told Margaret over the phone. "Family is family, and I think it's time we all moved forward." The invitation extended to Robert's sister Eleanor and her husband Ian, making it a proper family gathering. For the older family members, this was exactly what they had hoped for. They believed in healing, in second chances, in the power of sharing a meal to bring people together. If only they had known what Sarah had been researching in the months before this invitation. If only they had questioned why she insisted on cooking personally. refusing any offers to bring dishes or help in the kitchen. If only they had noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she served the meal on those carefully chosen, different-colored plates. But they saw none of these warning signs. They saw only a woman who wanted to rebuild bridges, who wanted to welcome them back into her life. Margaret suggested they bring dessert, but Sarah insisted she had everything covered. Eleanor offered to help cook, but Sarah said she wanted to do something special by herself. Ian mentioned that David had also been invited but couldn't make it that evening. Each of these seemingly innocent moments was actually Sarah Wilson, maintaining complete control over every aspect of what would become their final meal. July 29th, 2023, 7:30 in the evening. The 4 family members arrived at Sarah's home in Victoria. The atmosphere was warm, with hugs exchanged and genuine smiles all around. Margaret brought flowers from her garden, and Ian carried a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. 8 o'clock. Sarah served the meal she had prepared, a beef and mushroom dish that smelled absolutely delicious. What the guests didn't notice was that each person received their food on a different colored plate, a detail that would later prove crucial to the investigation. "Sarah, this is absolutely wonderful," Eleanor commented as she took her first bite. "What kind of mushrooms did you use? They have such an interesting flavor." "Oh, just some I found locally," Sarah replied with a smile that investigators would later describe as unnaturally controlled based on security camera footage from earlier that day. 9:15. The family finished their meal and moved to the living room for coffee and conversation. Everyone was in good spirits, talking about grandchildren, upcoming holidays, and shared memories. 10:30. The guests prepared to leave. Warm goodbyes were exchanged, with plans made for future gatherings. Sarah hugged each of them goodbye, knowing what she had just done. 11:45. Robert Coleman called emergency services from his home. He and Margaret were experiencing severe abdominal pain, nausea, and vomiting. "Something's very wrong," he told the dispatcher. "We need help immediately." 12:15 in the morning. Eleanor Matthews made a similar call. Both she and Ian were suffering from identical symptoms. The coincidence was too obvious to ignore. 12:30. 4 ambulances rushed the family members to different hospitals across the region. None of them understood what was happening to their bodies, but they all shared one terrifying commonality. They had all eaten the same meal at Sarah Wilson's house. What they didn't know was that they had just consumed Amanita phalloides, the deathcap mushroom, one of the most deadly fungi on Earth, responsible for 90% of mushroom poisoning deaths worldwide. And Sarah Wilson, who had served them this lethal meal, had eaten nothing herself that evening. When Detective Inspector James Morrison arrived at the first hospital early on July 30th, he was faced with a medical mystery that would quickly become a criminal investigation. "In 25 years of police work, I'd never seen anything like it," Morrison would later testify. 4 people, all showing identical symptoms of severe poisoning, all having shared one meal. It was immediately suspicious. The medical teams were puzzled. The symptoms, severe gastrointestinal distress, dehydration, and rapid deterioration, pointed to some form of toxin, but identifying the exact cause was proving difficult. Dr. Patricia Evans, the emergency physician treating Robert Coleman, made a crucial connection. "I remembered reading about similar cases in medical journals," she explained. The progression of symptoms was consistent with amatoxin poisoning, mushroom poisoning. Police immediately secured Sarah Wilson's home as a potential crime scene. Forensic teams searched for any remaining food from the dinner. Sarah's kitchen was thoroughly examined for any evidence of mushroom preparation. Hospital blood samples were rushed to toxicology labs for amatoxin testing. When investigators examined the plates from the dinner, they discovered something chilling. Each family member had been served beef Wellington on a different colored plate, and Sarah's own plate showed no traces of the mushroom-containing Wellington. She had clearly separated her own food from theirs, Detective Morrison noted. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate, but proving intent would require much more than different colored plates. The investigation was just beginning, and time was running out for the victims fighting for their lives in 4 different hospitals. Meanwhile, Sarah Wilson maintained her innocence, claiming she had simply made an honest mistake while foraging for mushrooms. But investigators were already uncovering evidence that would tell a very different story. 3 days into the investigation, as Robert and Margaret Coleman clung to life in intensive care, Detective Inspector Morrison received a call that would change everything. "We've analyzed her computer," digital forensics specialist Emma Clark reported. "You need to see this immediately." Sarah Wilson's internet search history revealed a chilling pattern of research. In August 2022, she had made multiple searches for death cap mushroom Victoria, Australia locations. In October, she searched for how to identify Amanita phalloides in the wild. In December, amatoxin poisoning symptoms timeline. In March 2023, how long does mushroom poison take to work? In June, death cap mushroom cooking preparation. And on July 15th, just 2 weeks before the dinner, Victorian locations where death cap mushrooms grow wild. This wasn't a woman accidentally picking the wrong mushrooms, Detective Morrison realized. This was someone who had spent nearly a year learning exactly how to kill people with them. Dr. Michael Thompson, the state's leading toxicologist, delivered the confirmation everyone feared. The blood tests are conclusive. All 4 victims show extremely high levels of amatoxins, consistent with death cap mushroom ingestion. Given the concentration levels, this appears to be intentional poisoning. On August 4, 2023, Robert Coleman passed away. His wife Margaret followed 3 days later. Eleanor Matthews died on August 8, despite doctors' desperate attempts to save her life through liver dialysis and experimental treatments. Only Ian Matthews survived, but with permanent liver damage that would affect him for the rest of his life. When confronted with the digital evidence, Sarah Wilson changed her story multiple times. First, she claimed the mushrooms were bought from a local market, though no receipt could be found. Then, she said she had found them while walking, but didn't realize they were dangerous. Finally, she claimed she was suffering from a brain tumor that affected her judgment, but medical examinations found no evidence of any tumor. On August 10, 2023, Sarah Wilson was formally charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. "The evidence is overwhelming," Detective Morrison stated at the press conference. This was a premeditated act designed to kill specific family members using one of nature's most deadly toxins. When Sarah Wilson's trial began in March 2024, the evidence presented painted a picture of calculated murder that chilled everyone in the courtroom. Crown Prosecutor David Mitchell laid out a methodical plan spanning almost a year. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was not an accident. This was not a mistake. This was a woman who researched, planned, and executed the murders of 3 innocent people using one of the most deadly substances available in nature." The prosecution presented the year-long internet search history, showing systematic research into death cap mushrooms. They showed the different colored plates, ensuring Sarah didn't consume the poisoned food. Medical evidence confirmed amatoxin as the cause of death. Financial records revealed mounting debts and potential inheritance considerations. And there was Sarah's multiple changing stories and false medical claims. Sarah Wilson's lawyer, Patricia Adams, attempted to argue that her client was suffering from mental health issues and that the poisoning was accidental. "My client is a woman who made a tragic mistake while dealing with severe depression and confusion." But this defense crumbled under cross-examination when no medical evidence could be found to support claims of mental incapacity. The most powerful moment came when Ian Matthews, the sole survivor, took the stand. Speaking slowly due to his ongoing health issues, he said, "I trusted her. We all did. She invited us into her home. She cooked for us. She hugged us goodbye. And all the while she knew she was sending us home to die. My wife of 45 years is gone. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law are gone. And for what? I still don't understand why." After deliberating for just 6 hours, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts. Justice Margaret Thompson sentenced Sarah Wilson to life imprisonment with a minimum of 33 years before parole eligibility. "You have taken 3 lives and permanently damaged a 4th, Justice Thompson stated. "You have destroyed families, orphaned grandchildren, and committed these crimes against people who trusted you enough to sit at your table. the court finds no mitigating circumstances that can excuse the calculated nature of these murders. Sarah Wilson showed no emotion as the sentence was read. She was immediately taken into custody to begin serving what would likely be the rest of her natural life in prison. Ian Matthews returned to an empty house that still echoed with 45 years of shared memories with Eleanor. The surviving family members established a support network to help him cope with both his physical recovery and the emotional trauma. "The hardest part isn't the liver damage," Ian shared in a victim impact statement. "It's waking up every morning and remembering that Eleanor won't be there. It's knowing that Robert and Margaret will never see their grandchildren graduate. It's the hole that can never be filled." Robert and Margaret Coleman's grandchildren, ages 8 to 16, had to grapple with losing their grandparents in such a horrific way. Family counselors were brought in to help them process the trauma. "How do you explain to a child that someone they trusted poisoned their grandparents?" asked one family member. "These kids will carry this with them forever." The case sparked significant changes. Australian hospitals updated their emergency protocols to better identify amatoxin poisoning, potentially saving future victims of accidental mushroom consumption. Nationwide education campaigns were launched about the dangers of wild mushroom foraging, with particular emphasis on death cap identification. Law enforcement agencies enhanced their digital forensics capabilities, recognizing how internet search histories can reveal premeditation in poisoning cases. The small Victoria community where the crime occurred was shaken to its core. "We're a place where people leave their doors unlocked," said one neighbor. "This made us realize that evil can hide behind the most ordinary facade." Local grief counselors worked with the community to process the collective trauma of such a shocking crime happening in their midst. Currently serving her sentence in a maximum security facility, Sarah Wilson continues to maintain her innocence despite the overwhelming evidence. She has shown no remorse and has made no attempts to explain her motives to investigators or the families she destroyed. Robert Coleman, Margaret Coleman, and Eleanor Matthews were more than victims in a crime story. They were beloved family members whose lives were cut short by someone they trusted. Robert's mechanical workshop now displays a memorial plaque reading, "In memory of an honest man who believed in second chances." Margaret's former school dedicated their library in her honor with the words, "A teacher who touched countless lives with kindness and wisdom." Eleanor's nursing colleagues established a scholarship fund for a woman who spent her life healing others. This case reminds us that evil can hide behind familiar faces and seemingly innocent invitations. While we shouldn't live in paranoia, maintaining healthy boundaries even with family members going through difficult times isn't unreasonable. In our connected world, our online activities leave permanent traces. This case showed how digital forensics can reveal premeditation and planning that would have been impossible to prove in earlier eras. Ian Matthews' journey reminds us that surviving a crime doesn't mean the impact ends. Communities must rally around survivors who face both physical recovery and emotional trauma. In a world where families are increasingly disconnected, the victims in this case died believing in the power of reconciliation and forgiveness. While their trust was betrayed in the most heinous way, their belief in family unity and second chances remains a testament to the best of human nature. What can we learn from this tragedy? How can we honor the memory of Robert, Margaret, and Eleanor? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The truth may fade with time, but it never disappears completely. For those who have lost their way between hope and despair, remember that justice can always be found if we never stop searching. Next time, we'll return with another story that reminds us that even in the darkest circumstances, truth will eventually come to light. Subscribe and like this video to help ensure these stories are never forgotten. Here at Faded Clues, we believe that every victim deserves to have their story told with dignity and respect. Until next time, never lose faith that justice will prevail.